And we know about this now because we've taken electron micrographs of it. We've studied it intensively for the last year and a half. And a lot of people say, well, how could we have moved so quickly with the coronavirus? Well, because we had been studying it for so long when SARS-1 hit, that we knew a lot about it, even though it was slightly different and much more pathogenic than SARS-1. SARS-CoV-2, that's what this is. Its real name is Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus number 2. That's how it gets its name, SARS-CoV-2. However, nobody likes to say that, so it got given that fancy little name, COVID-19. COVID-19 stands for Coronavirus Disease 2019. That's what it stands for. So we know it's part of the coronavirus because we've seen electron micrographs of it, and scientists who first saw it said it looks like it has a crown on it, and so it got coronavirus as its name, right? And so this is the way it looks when you do kind of a 3D image of it, and so we understand how that is, and mostly because we understand how the virus is put together. So this is the way the virus looks. You can see it has spike proteins, and we've already talked about how spike proteins work, right? And Amy showed us the receptor side and how it got in there and all that kind of stuff, right? There's a little M protein that helps with the formation of the envelope and really the virus germination when it's first leaving. And then we have hemagglutinin. Hemagglutinin is the way that it gets into the cell membrane of our cells. And then it's an RNA virus. There's a little tiny protein that's called the E protein. We don't know how much it is. And then, of course, the coronavirus is enveloped. Right? And tell me again, Mr. Eric, what is the purpose of an envelope in a virus?
Protection, and it's going to mask its advances your
Infectability.
Correct. Well, its major function is to infect the cell, absorbs into the cell. Okay? All right, so the symptoms have really changed, right? So early on, the symptoms were a dry cough, fever, tiredness, difficulty in breathing, and loss of taste and smell. So if we are vaccinated, these are still the symptoms that we look for. But if you're unvaccinated, there's a little bit different in symptomology. There was a publication that just came out last week that was talking about the differences between being vaccinated, being partially vaccinated, or not being vaccinated, and the symptomology that you would experience. I didn't have time to read it, so it's not going to be reported here. I just want to tell you that the symptoms are very different. Remember when I got it, I reported that I didn't really have any symptoms, even though my wife said I looked terrible. That's not really a symptom, you look terrible. I look like normal. So I didn't feel bad. People complain nowadays of having a runny nose or congestion, but really no fever, right? When if you're unvaccinated, a lot of times you have fever. There's a fly. So what we still see are that the coronavirus is mostly affecting people who are older, who have asthma, who are diabetics, people with heart disease, morbidly obese individuals, smokers, and pregnant females. Well, remember, if you're pregnant, you are immunocompromised because of the state that you're in, right? And so you're much more likely to come down with infections when you're pregnant. Okay? But it has changed our lives, right? And so part of this is never going to go back, right? So if you think about it, telemedicine, I think I've told you when my wife was sick with thrush, we just went on ViewAdoc and they helped us out, right? So telemedicine is going to be a big thing, the way we handle family and friends, right? My brother is a germaphobe, and so at his house, he has a piece of tape on the floor, and then there's pieces of tape all over, and you're not allowed to be in the middle because then you're within 10 feet, and if you've got coronavirus, he's going to get it. So he could be out there. So that's the way he treats everybody, not just me. But he and I are completely different. And so we went to an arcade, and I was playing the machines, and he had a hanky, and he was only touching the machines with the hanky. Just absolutely crazy. The way we meet, right, most of my meetings now are online. I very rarely go in person, although I would prefer that. The biology department's too big, we just decided to be online. The way we teach, so the online courses have become a much more prominent thing. Even though I'm on the side of the fence that basically says that you should not be taking an online class if you're taking a science class because of the lab. There's no way you can do the lab stuff virtually. It's just not effective. And if it were up to me, I would basically lay down the law and say, if you're going to do any professional program, we're not going to accept you if you're going online and taking an online class. It's not. To me, it's just no. It has to be in person. That's just shopping, right? So my wife now does most of her shopping through Amazon, and Vitacoast, as we know what Vitacoast is. Vitacoast is like an online grocery store. It's owned by Kroger's, right? You can buy your stuff and they ship it to you. You get it next day. It's pretty interesting, pretty cool. So curbside services, right? Those are still very popular. I'm the other guy. I want to go in the store and talk to people. This tramp, I want to go in, drink my coffee, walk around, talk to people, right? The way we vote, although that's not really changed the way I thought it was, I really thought they were going to do mostly, voting by mail or online voting. It's not going to happen for lots of reasons, but we definitely have the technology to do so, but we're just not going to do it for a lot of different reasons, right? Gardening, my wife has this huge, beautiful garden, and although it's not been very productive this year because it's been so hot, she still has it. And so it's going. Lemons are about to get ready to pick, and 3 of them are already fallen off the tree. They are delish. They are nice, big old lemons, right? They're really great. And then family time has been really different, where a lot of people spend time with the family, where before everybody was living their own lives, going to different places, right? It was really interesting to see how these different things have happened. And during the time of the pandemic, the people got so creative, they came up with a lot of cool inventions during that time. And some of them are yet to be realized, right? But those inventions are coming, right? There's gonna be all kinds of really cool things. And I just can't wait to see some of those things. And a lot of those individuals are using nature as a template, right? They're using the eyes of the fly, for instance, to make the lenses for some of the high-powered telescopes that we're looking out into the planets with, right? And so it's pretty interesting how we can take those ideas and modify them and use them for us to be able to understand the world we live in. Huh?
Thank you. I was just thinking
What's
the
that?
same thing.
What's
What's
that?
to go cocktails
Yeah.
in Texas.
Yeah.
Where we used to go.
There's a lot of things.
That was great.
Yeah, that was our moon launch.
So, if we think about flu and COVID, because there was a lot of people who reported that COVID was essentially the flu. There was actually some people who basically, as we started with the COVID pandemic in the United States around February 2020, there was some people who were reporting that when it got warmer in the summer, that COVID was just going to go away because it was seasonal. That never happened. We went into this major pandemic, and so the flu and COVID are nothing alike. Right. And so if we think about them, we can look at them from different perspectives. RO, when you say RO, that's what it means. And sometimes people refer to it R naught. That's reproductive number. What that means is how quickly you can transmit that to somebody else, right? And so if we think about that, flu has an RO of about 1.3. So if you have influenza and you come in contact with 10 people, it's likely that you're going to transmit the flu virus to one person, right? Maybe 2, 1.3 on the average, right? But if you have COVID, if you're in the United States, because this is based on the United States, if you're in the United States, then you're likely to transmit COVID to 2, maybe 3 people, right? Now, it depends on what country you're in, because if an early states of coronavirus, if you were living in Italy, you would probably transmit it to 8 people, because there's a lot more older individuals in Italy, and they're much more easily to succumb to the infection than individuals, the age group that are in this particular room right now. Okay? Elderly are very much affected by COVID. So that's interesting to think about. Hospitals, incubation time for flu, it's about 1 to 4 days. With COVID, it's up to 14 days. And that's still true even though we've relaxed some of our guidelines. Basically, our guidelines say if you've tested positive or have symptomology for COVID, that you isolate for 5 days, and then when you go back after the 5th day, you go back, but you wear a mask for another 5 days, right? And where before it was isolate for 14 days, get a test, then go back, right? So we because I really think, and nobody's saying this right now, but I'll say it, I'm not afraid to say it. To you guys, I'm gonna say this, I think the United States has reached herd immunity. I think there's enough of us now who've been vaccinated or who've had COVID, or a combination of the two, that now most of the population is protected, right? That doesn't mean that we're gonna have people who are not gonna continue to get sick, right? Because there's a segment of the population that hasn't been vaccinated, and those are the individuals that I really worry about, right? Because 15% of those individuals who are not vaccinated are going to have terrible, terrible symptomology with COVID. 15% of them.
If they get it again, or if they just get it, period?
Well, some of these people haven't got it yet.
What?
The first time they get it. The second time they get it, it should not be as bad. Okay? All right, so now looking at hospitalization rate, if you've got flu, 2% of all the cases of flu go to the hospital, but 19% of all COVID cases go to the hospital. That may not be true now because of herd immunity, but early on in the infectious process, 19% of the population were seriously sick that they had to go to the hospital. Excuse me. Okay. Sneeze.
Do you think, Pro, do you think that 19% number was from the first year, like 2020?
Yeah, it's different now, for sure. Okay? And then the case fatality rate for flu is about less than 0.1%, but with COVID, in the United States, depending on what state you live in, right? And I'll show you some of the statistics in a minute. But depending on what state you live in, it could be anywhere from 1 to almost 4%, right? And it's just different, right? And I'll show you some of that. I'll let you all kind of tell me what the maps are telling you, right? Because in some cases it's dramatic what happens. Right? Questions so far? So early on, we wanted to flatten the curve, right? We kept talking about that. And that was really a good way to continue to say that we want to maintain the level of COVID cases now. Because in the early stages of the COVID pandemic, if you will, epidemic here, we had so many people going to the hospitals were overtaxed, they were overburdened. And we don't want that to happen, because if that happens, if there's so many people in the hospital with COVID, and they're taking up all the beds, and there are very few beds for other individuals, then people who have heart attacks, people who have cancer, people who are in serious automobile accidents, sometimes they will not be helped like they should be because there's so many COVID individuals. And you can't take a COVID individual and put them on one side of the room and then take somebody who just had heart surgery and put them on the other side of the room. It's just not gonna work, right? You have to sequester them, because you definitely don't want that heart patient to come down with COVID when they're in the hospital, right? Because then that could be detrimental to their particular well-being and really livelihood. And so early on, we thought that fomites were a problem. What's a fomite? Tay, what's a fomite? What's a fomite, Clarissa? Huh? Oh, what's a fomite?
An inanimate object that is used to spread disease.
It's any inanimate object. So this is a fomite. Your cup is a fomite, your pencil is a fomite, your computer is a fomite, everything's a fomite that's inanimate. Early on, we thought that fomites played a role in the transmission of COVID. And so we were telling people, you know, if you've got, like I just sneezed in my hand, I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna get some alcohol. Anybody got any alcohol on them? Anybody have hand sanitizer? Because I really don't wanna touch anything with this hand. I'm gonna like get it a little bit alcoholed. Okay, good. Just give me a couple of squares. There we go. So, and that's why did I want to do that? Is effective against what?
Envelope viruses.
Envelope viruses, which is what COVID and influenza are. And I don't know if you know this right now, but we're having a big problem with influenza. My cousin just called me from Corpus Christi, and he said, everybody's sick down here. I'm like, oh, hell. I said, what's wrong? Corpus?
Where you visited?
Yeah.
Well, didn't they predict that because of Australia's flu season?
It's supposed to be a really bad flu season. But, I mean, even little kids are getting sick in Corpus.
Well, they said that in 2019, that the pediatric flu was worse than COVID that year. It killed more kids than COVID has at all.
So he called me and said, you know anything about this RSV? I said, yes. He goes, should we worry about it? I go, no. I said, mostly
adults?
young, huh?
For adults?
Yeah, I said mostly young kids get it. I'm more worried about flu, so we all got the vaccine already. I'm like, then why are you sick? we don't know what it is. It's not flu, it's flu. I don't know why they're not testing positive. The symptoms they have is flu. They've got flu. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's some other strain that they're not looking for.
Is it all the normal symptoms?
It's flu.
They got body aches, fever,
Everything.
yeah.
You could hear them like,
I guess you lucked out.
it's flu.
I'm not excited for that.
So I don't know what's going on. Anyway, I think I told you the story about my wife. Early on, she said, don't you think that everything that comes in the house should be disinfected? I tried to provide scientific reasoning. Like, no, I don't think, and you know what she said, Tram? She said, don't you think in other words, you need to do it, right? So, okay, fine. I got a UV wand, you know. So I made sure she could see me doing the wand thing, so she knew that I was disinfecting. Made her happy, because if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right? So, okay. We first said, you know, COVID can go up to 6 feet. We now know it's 10, maybe more. So, you know, if it had been me, I would have said 12 feet to begin with, and then I would have come back on that. But the problem with that is the epidemiologists made so many mistakes early on that they weren't really trusted about midway through the pandemic, right? Fauci to me is a hero, but Fauci to a lot of people is a villain, right? But he tried to do his best based on what his constraints were, and his constraints were really a lot of political things, right? It wasn't even science. And therefore, it made him look terrible when he made these decisions based on what he was told he should say instead of what science was telling him. Right? And so therefore, we had a lot of people basically say that Fauci didn't know what he was doing. Right. We talked about receptors already, and we talked about the ACE receptor and how COVID attaches to those and how that allows it to go into the cell. Talked about that. The replication cycle is a little bit more complicated, but Jen, it still follows the exact same steps we talked about, right? But we talked about attachment, absorption, penetration, viral component synthesis, assembly, maturation, and then we also talked about release. Yes, ma'am?
The spike protein, okay, I see it right here. Never mind, spike protein binds to ACE2. I was just making sure.
Remember, Amy, make the receptor site. There's a receptor site, and the spike protein goes in here, attaches, and then what happens? It opens up, and the virus gets right there. And so that's pretty cool. That's what it's showing right here. There's the spike protein and the receptor site, and then lo and behold, come on in, virus. You're welcome into the cell. And then the problem starts. That was good. That was good cue. Start coughing right when I said that, right?
Mine's not COVID though.
Okay, so how did it happen? Why did SARS-CoV-2 become a big deal? Well, many of us, including me, believe it was a mixing of antigens, of epitopes. And the epitopes that mixed were bats, humans, and a pangolin. How many people know what a pangolin is? This is what a pangolin is, right? He's kind of a cute little dude. And in some parts of the world, he's considered a delicacy. People like to eat him. So I believe, and many people believe, that there was a mixing of these. And that's the way Mother Nature works, right? When you have close proximity to animals and humans, there are these mixing, and then you get a virus that's novel. The little n before SARS-CoV-2, or the little n before COVID-19, meant novel. It meant brand new. We'd never seen this before. And therefore, we had no immunity to it, right? And so that's why it made so many people sick. Right? So why did this happen? Well, there's been a lot of studies that have looked at these things, and even when they looked at them from different perspectives, like what was the dominant one? Was it the pangolin, was it the human, or was it the bat? It all showed that it's most likely that these three things were the epitopes, were the parts of the organisms that came together to, in that virus, to actually allow the virus to be so dangerous to us. Okay? And why? Well, we believe it happened in a wet market. And a lot of people will look at the Wuhan market in the district of Wuhan in China, but we'll never really know. So let's not just say that. Let's just say it happened in an environment like that, because we're never going to really know. China really early on was very forthcoming and was sharing a lot of data with us. The reason we could move so quickly on COVID-19 was because of the genomic sequencing that they had done already for that virus once it hit in China. But then after that, it just shut down and no information came out. We don't know how many cases they had. We don't know anything. What we do know is they have some of the strictest rules that deals with COVID, in that they basically shut down whole cities and say, do not leave. And I think there's penalties if you leave. You know, I don't know what they are, I don't know. But what I do know is they shut down the entire city. And therefore they have, or they proclaim, or they purport that they have very low cases of COVID. Yep.
Didn't they even take away people's dog, like in the most recent one, there was somewhere that was on lockdown and they took away dogs so that people wouldn't have to like go outside and walk them, I'm pretty sure.
I had not heard that, Ellie, so I'm not saying
Maybe
that that's
not.
not true, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna comment on something I don't know.
Yeah.
Canada was pretty strict about it
Yeah.
for a while.
But not as strict as China.
It's like
China
you
is
couldn't
super
even
strict.
get into the grocery store unless you were vaccinated.
Yeah, that would never fly here, right? Oh my God. Yeah, it's just amazing. So let's just think about this for a moment. From an American perspective, why is this like this?
Why is what, like what?
So, how many people know that there's a major pandemic of cholera in Haiti? Okay. Do you care about it?
I'm wearing a Haitian flag on my t-shirt. Yeah.
Good. Do you care about it? You do? Okay. Most Americans don't. And most Americans, cholera. Very bad dysentery. Most Americans don't care because most Americans don't know what's happening. Let's take another example. How many people in here are worried about the big seafood salmonella outbreak that's occurring in California and Arizona?
Yes.
How many people have heard of that?
Heard of it. I get alerts.
Oh, good.
Emails.
Look at you.
For the, I don't know how it's.
Some seafood?
Yeah. There's a big salmonella.
It's
outbreak.
the
I don't know.
seafood that has the salmonella has only been distributed in California and in Arizona.
Fresh, frozen? Frozen.
Frozen.
Salmon, shrimp, what kind of seafood?
All of it.
Yeah, it's all coming from a certain place,
Certain
right?
place, it's just, and I can't remember the place. But how many people care about that?
When it gets worse.
Yeah,
We
So,
don't eat seafood.
because, Jen, I don't know if you know this yet, I don't know if you figured this out, but Americans only care about what's bothering Americans. Yes? Are you with me? So it's very different from Amy to me. Right, Amy, what do you care about? She cares about student loans, she cares about having a job, those kinds of things. Those are important to her. What do I care about? Anything that's gonna affect my retirement, right? Anything that's gonna put somebody not very smart in a political position, don't want that, right? All these things, right? I just voted yesterday. I was gonna be sure I got voted. I counted at least, right? But those are the things that worry about me. So, but I worry about all these infections that are going on worldwide. Why, Isabella?
Because they can come back and affect you.
All they need to do is somebody needs to jump on an airplane and they can bring it to us.
Are other countries much different though?
What do you mean?
About caring?
I don't know about other countries because I haven't really studied the social strata of those companies. But let's ask somebody, what about Germany? What do you think?
When I used to watch the news, obviously they're mostly about what's happening in Germany, right? They would go a little bit more broad if there was like something really bad going on, right? But
Very bad.
just this self-centered as.
As Americans?
As
You can say it, okay.
Yeah.
Isabella, what about Poland?
I feel like they're very concerned with most of Europe because Poland is much poorer than Germany, so it really depends on the state of Europe.
Germany's rich,
Well,
right?
in Europe, you have so many different countries that are so close together. Where here, there's
That's
only-
good for you to say, but you're American, right? So,
I'm not saying that I
Oh,
don't look
okay.
at other countries, but like, if, I guess in a sense, it would be easier for the United States to worry about themselves. I don't know.
Tram, you know I'm gonna ask you because I'm really interested in what you have to say.
You know what's my answer?
What it's gonna say, what it's gonna be,
Just like that.
just like that. So, that's unfortunate, right? Because, and so, I know I'm gonna get in trouble here, but I'm gonna say it anyway. So, when the vaccines first came out and the United States bought all these vaccines, there were people in the world who were saying, the United States of America should not be taking all those vaccines and being used for their population. They should share them equally with everybody in the world. I'm on the other side of the fence on that, right? My conservative face sticks out for just a little bit, right? Let's take care of our people first. Then we'll help everybody else. Because we bought all these vaccines, and all the vaccines that we bought, that we gave away to lots of countries, we didn't charge them for it. We just gave it to them.
Their vaccination rates are roughly the same as ours too.
Correct.
Wasn't there a higher population in the United States?
We are a small population compared to China, compared to India. And if you remember, and really Brazil's like probably even more, I don't really pay attention to Brazil very much. But if we think about India for just a moment, India was in such a quandary that they were burning bodies because they had no way to do that, right? Where we had refrigerated trucks and we're putting bodies in the refrigerated truck until we could do something. Right? But India couldn't do that. And they have over 1 billion people in their country. So, you know, it's a big difference.
Cremation is also part of their culture.
I don't have a problem with cremation. As a matter of fact, and I'm gonna get in trouble again, here I go. I think we should burn everybody who dies. And then we should spread the ashes in nature and let the ashes feed nature.
I agree.
Yes,
But wouldn't that like cause like a lot of like smog or whatever, like from?
no,
burning?
because we have very clean incinerators.
Okay.
I'm not saying build a campfire and just throw bodies. I'm not saying that, Jess. We have really cool incinerators. And it gets so hot that almost nothing gets eliminated. I mean, you might have a little bit of smell, but you don't get any real big noxious fumes coming off of that.
There's the cool things they're doing with bodies these days. They're turning people into diamonds.
To what?
Into
Diamonds, yeah, I haven't seen that. They're
Okay,
ashes.
time. Tell me what that is.
They do the
Diamonds.
ashes.
Yeah,
They compress the ashes into a diamond.
Oh my God! Do you know how much pressure that would take?
They're doing it, and also they're like turning bodies into a tree. They're, like,
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
Like a
I'm
pod
more
with a
I'm more
tree.
okay than that than the
Yeah.
diamond thing.
You're not okay with the diamond?
Yeah, because it takes so much energy to make a diamond. Where really you could just take the body, throw it in a hole, stick a tree on top, cover it
Yeah.
up, and the body would nourish the tree. I'm okay with that.
I've never really believed in caskets.
Oh, I think they're awful too. As a matter of fact, when my aunt died, they said, you need to make arrangements. I said, okay. So I went to the funeral home and they were showing me all of these
And they're like
beautiful,
$10,000.
beautiful caskets. And they said, well, this one's on sale for like 15,000. I'm like,
Yeah.
holy shish kebabs. I said, do you have anything on the $100 range? And they're like, but don't you want your
rent a
loved one to
casket?
be in a beautiful casket for eternity? I'm like, she is dead and she doesn't care.
Yeah.
Which is probably a no-no. to a
These
lot of
days you
people.
can rent one.
Rent a
You
casket?
can rent a casket. You never heard of it? You can rent a casket and then after the service, and then after the service, they'll move the body into like a cheaper one, like a, pretty much, like a cheap.
You know, all I need is a little
casket.
box. So, my mother told me before she died, I'm gonna be cremated. My dad was just the opposite. My dad said, put me in a casket and this is the route I want you to take my body through the city. because my dad was very gregarious. And he wanted to go like the longest route in the city, so all his friends could see him go down and
Like
be
a
buried.
parade.
And people came out of there because he was very popular in certain parts of the city. And they would come out to pay respect, right? And that's what my dad went. And my cousin texted me on the phone and said, "Look at all the people coming out of their offices." I'm like, that is really cool. How do they know it's my father? Right? But they did. And then he wanted to be buried, you know, with my mother, right? So, fine, whatever. And then when they said, well, okay, so for my aunt, I bought this really inexpensive box. It was a box. It wasn't a casket. It was a box. There was nothing shiny about it. And they said, well, where do you want to bury her? And I'm like, well, how much is it to buy a gravesite? Right? They said, this much money. I'm like, time. And I looked at my brother and I said, man, let's cremate her. And so we cremated her, and then she was in a little box. And I said, where do you want to put her? I said, can I just put her with my mother and a father? I'm like, yeah, that's only $5,000. I'm like, okay, let's do that. Can you believe that?
Oh, $5,000.
To dig a hole is $5,000.
Did it have a marker or anything like that too, or just right in the same?
No,
plot?
I mean, there's a little tiny plaque.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have to pay
Here
back.
lies Eva.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
When I told my wife, if I go first, I want you to cremate me and throw me in the backyard.
That's what my husband says.
Just throw me in the backyard.
That's how I am too.
Do not buy a fancy urn. Get a little box. Throw me in the backyard. So this is kind of funny. So here is what's important. Check it out. This is statistics. Now, these are a little bit like from last year. BBC published these things. It's all based on age, right? So if you are from 1 year old to about 30, the average percentage of people who have COVID who die.
I was wondering, do we have an outdated PowerPoint?
You might, because I update these all the time.
Okay. You had long COVID on a different slide too that we did now.
Oh,
So
okay.
we don't have this.
You might, I'll put it down. And sometimes I just like, I try to make it as relevant as possible, right? So, if you, from 9 to 30, the death rate for people who get COVID is about 0.5 to 1%, right? If you get older, right, so look at 70-year-old, now it's about, 5.5%. But at 80, it's, almost 10%. So again, as we get older, we lose the ability to fight infections. This is why I always tell my family, I'm coming down, I want to visit you all, but, I don't want to bring the nasty Austin virus with me, so I'm going to wear a mask. And when I get there, my oldest aunt always pulls my mask off. She said, we can't see your face.
The old ones never care.
They don't. She said, she told everybody in the room, if I die, I lived a good life, and this is the way it is. That's what she told me. So here, check it out. Early on, look where all the cases were. So what can be said about where most of the cases were? Poor. Agreed. What else?
Bigger cities?
Really? So look where the bigger cities are. What do you consider big city?
Oh, I guess.
This is for
quite
deaths
true.
though, right?
These are for deaths, right?
Yeah.
So there's mortality rates.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
So the bigger cities to me would be New York, LA, right? Seattle, Houston, maybe Houston, right? Then, Miami, Atlanta. Atlanta's hit pretty hard, right? Chicago, not really, right?
It was also,
Where's Austin? Austin is about right there. Yep.
Yeah, I guess I would have a theory that it would also be or happen in places where the vaccination rates weren't as high.
So you could say that because the vaccinations are usually drawn between political lines on the South. This is where it's happening, are mostly going to be a bunch of people who don't want to get vaccinated. Agreed.
Access to healthcare too.
Yeah, access to healthcare is the other big one.
That's what I was gonna say. I don't think it's the fact that people don't wanna get vaccinated or don't wanna go to the doctor. It's the fact that we can't afford to go to the doctor per se.
But the vaccines are free.
Now, But
No,
back
they've always
then-
been free.
Well, but back then, before the vaccines came out, people couldn't afford to
Oh,
go to
well,
the
that's
doctor
true.
to get care to be able to survive the virus. I think that's why the death rates were so bad in the beginning.
What else can be said? Kristen, did you want to say something? I thought it was something, maybe it was Al, okay.
Two theories, could it be different like lifestyles, like eating habits, like in the South?
Yeah.
So
I
you're
think
saying
we're
it's
always-
based, you're saying it's based on the healthiness of the state?
Potentially.
Maybe, maybe.
And like the sunbirds, like older people, I don't know if they go down to like New Orleans or
Okay,
anything, but.
okay. Jen?
I wanna throw the word race out there, but different heritage,
You can say ethnicity, how about that?
yes.
So
Because
what
they-
you're
they-
saying is certain ethnic groups got hit harder, is that what you're saying?
What, I thought that's what I had read in the past too, that there's.
Well,
I
this
read
map,
the same
this
thing.
map does say that. This map does say that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think it could also relate to the homeless population? Or were they?
I don't know about that.
Cause how would they be counted or whatever?
What's
Yeah,
that?
that's what I
Like,
was
how would they
wondering,
be
if they were
counted?
counted or not.
Mississippi, Alabama, and that whole New Mexico.
Okay, those are two different populations.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this population there.
Yeah.
What groups live there?
Native Americans and Latinos.
Native Americans. These are indigenous people, these are First Nations people, and why they get hit hard.
Because they don't like modern medicine.
And their immune
Would that
systems
be-
will not work. Diabetes.
Go, tell them.
The government didn't provide the
We forgot about them.
I think we've always forgot about it.
We forgot about them. They don't have good representation. They don't have somebody to say, help us. The Navajo people need help. They don't have good representation to do that. Right? So they got hit hard.
They did. I was there in May of 2021 in Taos, and the Native American, like Pueblo, I guess they call it, the reservation or whatnot, was
Yeah.
completely shut off to the public. Like, no one could go in there. That was in 2020.
And they have the right to do that because those are their sanctioned territories. They can shut down the res at any point and they don't have to let anybody in. Those are separate from the United States. They are the sanctioned territories of those people. Right? Okay, so that's this group, right? What about this group? What about this group? What do we know about this group?
Mississippi River Delta and Alabama.
Okay, but the Mississippi River Delta, you can see all up and down, there's quite a few cases, right? But look here, it's really hitting Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and some parts of Georgia. And you might even go to, I don't know, into South Carolina, a little bit North Carolina. What do we know about those people? Poor. They're more poor, they're more apt to have jobs that they have to go into because they are service people. They're first line people. And that's why they got hit hard. Where in Austin, Texas, very few cases, why? Because most people in Austin, Texas could just work from home. So there were cases here in Austin. There were deaths here in Austin, but not the deaths we saw in San Antonio. It's interesting to think about what happened in California, which have some really big cities there, right? Why didn't they get hit hard? But they did get hit hard early on. But say what you will about Gavin Newsom. Who knows who Gavin Newsom is? Who's Gavin Newsom?
He was the governor?
Still the
Still
governor.
is.
The governor, when he saw things hitting hard, what he did was he hired an individual company to do statistics and model where the virus would hit the hardest. And then he put all the resources into those cities. So he stopped the spread really quickly. Say what you will about Gavin Newsom, but he was on top of things. What happened in New York? What happened in New York? They got hit hard really early on. And then what happened? Now say what you will about Cuomo. Say what you will. But Cuomo got on the television every day at noon and told the people exactly what he was doing and how he was moving resources to different parts of the city who were being hit hard, and he had a plan for everything that's going on. Therefore, New York was, the spread was pretty much squashed. Now say what you will about, I know shortly thereafter he was no longer governor because of what he was doing.
Obvious reasons.
But, you know, I guess when you have that much power, you know, sometimes you forget that you can't do certain things.
Do you think that the South was affected, and I guess indigenous people could be in that same category, do you think those places were, could have been affected more because our politicians, in a broad sense, were scared to tell us too much information and fear of retaliation or?
So without getting too much into politics did play a role, for sure. But
Well,
it played a role in a couple of ways. Pressure was put on to the healthcare people to not tell the truth.
That's what I'm saying, like, I feel like that happened a lot in the
And the
South.
other thing that happened was there was a lot of misinformation that was put out there by certain groups of individuals. And that scared people. So even if some people might have got the vaccine, once they started to listen to certain groups of individuals, they no longer would.
The
The Q, right, exactly, yeah.
Take Mississippi, you've only got 5 cities in Mississippi that have any halfway decent hospital.
Yeah.
So if you live
Yeah,
out in
I guess
the
so.
rural areas out there, more likely you might be diabetic, might be a smoker, might be obese, might eat like crap, might not see a doctor on a regular
Or not have
basis.
a car.
Right,
A
or
lot
not
of
be
them.
able to travel to Tupelo or Jackson or Biloxi to get.
That is a
care.
really good hypothesis, very good.
Chip away.
But you can see how we've come to these conclusions based on what we know, right? And what the data's telling us. And that's what critical thought is all about. Critical thought is about using data, understanding the data, and then maybe somehow or another intervene so that we won't have those problems again. Can we take what certain people did? Can we take what certain people did who were successful in managing the outbreak in their cities and maybe learn from those things? That's what we need to do. But will we do that? Probably not,
Say it again.
unfortunately. But will we do that?
Do what?
Take those lessons that were successful
Oh,
and,
Hopefully.
well, we won't do it, we won't do it.
That north part of Texas, isn't that reservations as well?
It's more
I'm-
oil field.
Yeah,
out there.
it's, you know,
It's very
I don't
boring.
really know. Texas is so big, you know, the climates, the ground, all kinds of different, they're all so different,
The
right?
statistics in the Panhandle is a lot of immigrant
Because of
people,
oil.
and there's a lot of extremely poor people there, like very, very improvised people.
That's all. So, I don't know who it was, somebody told me about blood types the other day, and I said I said I was gonna talk to you a little bit about this. This is a paper that was published in 2020 from Miller and his colleagues in COVID-19 Resource Center. You can look that up. But here it basically says that if you're type O, that's a protective blood type against COVID. So what that means is that if you're type O, you're more likely not to have serious infections or serious complications due to COVID. But if you type A, you're more likely to develop really serious problems. Yes,
That was the same for my family. Me and my dad was type O, and we didn't have that much symptoms. But my mom, she was like type A, and she had COVID for like 3 weeks, and she kept coughing.
I don't know if I believe it, my husband's type O, but he was like dead.
so that, okay, so when you talk about statistics, what you talk about statistics is you're generalizing for the population. That doesn't mean that everybody's gonna follow that. That just means what we did was we looked at thousands of people, we took their blood type down, then we followed them to see how sick they got, then we put that all through statistics, and the confidence interval, right, at a 95% confidence interval, basically says this is true, this is real.
I've been wondering about this since like, people started having different symptoms, and my mom and I were like, it has to be blood type, and we're like, we'll find out in 5 years, and I'm gonna text her.
Oh, it's already been published.
Yeah.
I know there's a different paper that goes broader into it, or gives
Yeah,
more broad.
There's
details.
a paper published now that basically says there really isn't any advantage of having any blood type.
Yeah, I know, like,
Oh.
when I read it, that's basically what it said, 'cause I have AB positive.
Yeah.
But again, it's
And-
gonna
yeah.
depend, it's gonna depend on the time period that the study was. Because what is happening now with COVID is very different the way that COVID was acting a year and a half ago. Right, where we didn't have herd immunity. Remember, I'm on record, you guys have heard me say, I believe we've reached herd immunity. Although nobody else is saying it, I'm saying it right now. Telling you all, I think we've reached herd immunity. What does that mean? That means that it's unlikely that we're gonna have a lot of real serious illnesses anymore. But are people gonna get sick, and will some of them be serious? Yes. But the numbers are not gonna be like they were before. Right? I'm more worried about influenza now than I am about COVID.
Chloe, did you see how in Virginia they had to close the high school down?
Uh-uh.
Because more than half of the population of the students got sick and they had gastrointestinal symptoms, but also they don't know if that's due to the flu. Because they already checked the water and the food and it was.
It sounds very much what's like going down in Corpus right now with my family and a bunch of people down there.
What's
They're having a big problem down there with an illness that nobody can identify. I think it's flu. I don't think it's the flu that they're looking for. I think it's another strain, and we just aren't looking for
Well,
it.
they said that from Australia's flu, that it was gonna be really, really bad.
But this is not one of the ones that we're looking for. This is something different.
I think it's what I have.
Oh, you think it's what you had?
Yeah.
You tested negative for flu?
I tested negative for COVID, but I definitely had the flu.
Okay.
And I usually don't stay sick that long. I'm usually like out in like 3 days. I've been gone for like
Well,
2.5
when I was talking to your husband on the phone that one day, I could hear him. I'm like, oh my God, please take care of her. She sounds horrible.
Like I wasn't
He
even
goes,
trying.
she'll be okay, she'll be okay.
I'll
He's
be-
a very nice guy.
He is. He graduated from Corpus. So
Okay.
like we go down there sometimes. So if people are sick, it's because of whatever this tiny little thing's going around. There's also something going around that's affecting small children and elderly people.
I was just talking about that before you came in. You know, so my cousin called me, he said, do you think it's RSV? I'm like, no, I think it's flu. She goes, we all tested negative for the flu. So, you know, he's like, well, I don't know. I said, to me it sounds like flu. But it's interesting to think about this for a minute. Coronavirus, when it first was described, it was an enteric infection. It only became respiratory later in its development. So maybe this is coronavirus, a different strain that's affecting them now. I don't know. Somebody needs to be looking at this stuff, right? Because we're Americans, and you know, Austin Texans don't really care what's going on in Corpus Christi, unless you lived there for some of your life, or married somebody who's from there. You don't really care. Jen, do you care about Corpus?
Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay. She's just pulling my leg. All right, right now, these are the things that kind of work, right? Remdesivir doesn't help everybody, helps some people, right? Convalescent plasma doesn't help everybody, helps some people. So one of my first family members that got sick was my cousin-in-law, who married my favorite cousin. And he got really sick. He's type A, got really sick. She was a trooper. She took care of him, and they have some special need kids, and so she was taking care of them. They got sick, he got sick, she was sick, she still took care of him. So the kids got better in a couple of days. She was okay, but he was sick for almost a month, and I didn't think he was gonna make it. He was bad. But he came through, and after he came through, he called me and he said, hey, do you think we should go and donate our plasma? I'm like, dude, that is so cool. You just got well, and now you're thinking about donating your plasma. And they went to donate plasma. Doesn't help everybody, but it helps some people.
Did you ever see the studies they did about the antibodies in breast milk?
Mm-mm.
I did a study I was involved in a study, cause I had COVID when I was breastfeeding my daughter still, and, it was super weird, but.
Do you have a copy of that study?
I don't have anything anymore.
Okay.
I had a computer and
What did the study conclude?
that, you carried antibodies in your milk that helped your
The
child.
baby.
My daughter never got sick. She never tested positive, she never got sick, and it was because I was breastfeeding her.
10% of the population.
And there was only like one person, so it was a group of like 50 to 100 females who were breastfeeding, and only one person didn't have the antibodies in their breast milk.
10% of the population, Terry, will never get COVID. They are protected immunologically and genetically, for whatever reason. My wife has not got COVID. I had it, a bunch of family members had it. Her mother and her sister got it really bad. She went to help them, didn't get it. So I call her a 10%er. She hates it when I do that, because, she says, you're gonna give me the jinx. I'm like, I'm not gonna give you the jinx, it's just science, right? So these two are also antibodies, right? This one inhibits some of the mechanism of the virus getting into the cell, and then dexamethasone was actually used as, a steroid, so that it was given to people who had really bad inflammation. And if you could slow down the inflammation or stop the inflammation, the patient had a better chance of surviving. Right. Because that was a big killer of people when the lungs got so inflamed that they couldn't function properly. Okay? So somewhere I saw this image, right? This is talking to the Hispanic population mostly, because the Hispanic population is so non-compliant that something has to be done, right? And so this is the way you say this. No seas, güey. Right? Ponte la máscara. That basically is saying, hey brother, please wear your mask. Right? But it's this little guy right here. Does anybody know who this is? Who is this? Who is it? Who is it? Huh? No, this is not Chespirito, El Chavo. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that
Yeah.
one, yeah.
So here is El Chavo. He's a very famous icon in the Hispanic Latino world. And so you're getting him to help, talk and spread the word. Because Hispanics aren't going to listen. Hispanics, Latinos, do not trust the medical institution. So they don't want to go there. They would rather go to a curandero. What's a curandero? What's a curandero, Christian?
Like
What's a
herbal-
curandero, Danny?
Somebody that just, they do like, they can do herbs or like a.
Folk
level,
medicine. Folk
something.
medicine.
It's whatever you believe.
The Latino world trusts the curandero, the healer. That's what it means.
Hey, they're not lying though.
There's something to be said for Eastern medicine. I'm a big proponent for Eastern medicine. To me, the best medicine is a combination of Western and Eastern. How can you say that Eastern medicine doesn't work when it's been practiced for thousands of years?
And don't you get like medicine derived from like herbs and stuff like that? So it's like
So the Latino population has a lot of similarities to our Asian buddies. Right, my friend? There's a lot of similarities in our culture. I believe that the best medicine is a combination of Eastern and Western techniques. I get massaged, I get acupuncture, I get cupping, I get all kinds of manipulations. I think it's good for me. Right? Not everybody believes that. And if you want to do those things, may I introduce you to South Austin Acupuncture, which is
I was just gonna ask.
Is that why your
something.
face looks like so smooth
What's your youth secret?
No, I don't know what that's about.
Wait, at least you don't say.
Because South Austin Acupuncture, it's their primary, their only office now. There used to be a bigger outfit, but during pandemic they almost went out of business. But they're located, where Cherry Creek Cafe is,
Yeah.
over on the corner of Stasny and Manchac.
Kind of
Oh, I'm
by the
sorry,
South-
Manchaca.
South Austin campus.
Right across
There.
from South Austin. They're there, and they are a good group of people, and it's all done by scale. You know what I'm talking about? So you go there, you can, I always tell them, I want acupuncture, and I want cupping, and then you go in, you pay a certain amount for cupping, and then the acupuncture is based on scale. So the scale means how much money do you make?
How much do you pay for cupping?
The entire process for cupping and acupuncture is $60. And that's with a tip. I give them a $20 tip, so it's like $40. It's cheap.
I mean, I do cupping with my mom for free.
Dang, girl.
My friend goes to South Austin acupuncture and he has really bad ADD. And they give him like herbal supplements and he says it's really helped. And then he also has horrible anxiety. And so he's been going for panic attacks. And he's like, it's the best thing. I used to go growing up. It's
This
so good.
is Eastern medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all Eastern medicine, but it's a lot of the ideologies
Yeah, like
of
pressure
Eastern medicine.
points too. It's
Pressure
very
point, yeah.
interesting. I love it. But
So
they
if you've
do-
not tried it, I would highly recommend it.
For like the sound healing,
Mhm.
my mother-in-law is actually taking classes on that right now.
Yeah.
And I love it, it's one of the best.
So the other part of Eastern medicine that's really important is massage. Right?
So it's just to bring toxins to the surface of your skin?
That's, what do they call that when you scrape, what do they call that, Tram?
I know that, but I don't
Oh,
know.
dry.
What do you call it?
Is it dry brushing?
I don't know what,
That's for
I know, like you have some oil on your body
And
and then,
you scratch,
Yeah.
you scratch the surface, and that's supposed to relieve the toxins and move the blood closer to the skin, and it's supposed to heal a lot of stuff.
Do you believe that works?
I've never had
That
that done.
works.
Oh, the
works.
cup, isn't that the cupping?
No, the cupping is different.
Yeah.
Cupping does the same thing, except you don't scratch. You have these little globes that they put a
Let
little
me
light on it, and
translate.
it causes a vacuum. You put it on, and it sucks up your fascia and your skin into the cup.
coin rubbing.
How long does, when you go that, how long?
It's about a 30-minute session, and then you have a bunch of hickeys all over your body.
I'm thinking about it or anything. Yeah. I've been wanting to do acupuncture for a really long time.
Vaccines are helpful, but you know, it's mostly about if people are going to take them or not. And so the ones that I recommend, and really the only ones you can get in, I think you can get the Norlox one also, but I recommend Pfizer BioNTech first and then Moderna. And the reason I do that, so people will tell you that the efficacy for Moderna is a lot greater than the Pfizer, but not that much greater. But what I like about Pfizer BioNTech is there's less side effects that have been reported. So therefore, to me, the safety profile and the efficacy of the vaccine seems to me to be much better. Therefore, I recommend the Pfizer BioNTech one. But Moderna gets all the credit for the technology because it's their technology. That whole RNA,
mRNA,
that whole messenger RNA is their technology. Okay? You guys know I'm a J&J boy. You know it. But I'm telling you, do not take the J&J vaccine.
I've heard that.
They pulled it off. They pulled it off the market. They already
It
know.
wasn't very long into it though,
They
was
just
it?
pulled it off. It was good, but there was so many things that could happen.
Wasn't that a single dose?
Like
Bless
blood
you.
clots or something like that?
Or do you think, like, for example, getting the flu shot will help with whatever's going around?
I don't know, but I'm a big proponent for flu shot. My
Yes.
wife's already got it. I haven't got
Get
it
the flu
yet.
shot.
I'm trying to find time to go and get it. I already have my paperwork filled out. I just gotta go.
Not the same day.
And especially since our colleague, Miss Valencia, has already had the flu she's telling.
I
and
had
I'm
the
like-
flu and the flu shot. The only reason why I'm still here is because I had the flu shot. Get your flu shot.
And she sounded horrible, like when her husband was talking, you're like, I'm like, oh God, please take care of her. All right, bombs, oh my God.
Oh.
Chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine therapy with azithromycin, bomb.
Oh, I understand. I thought you meant like a bomb.
No, these are like, they don't work, right? Even they were purported to work, right? And then the other thing, of course, is ivermectin.
So they work or they don't?
They don't work. You wouldn't believe how many people were like illegally getting this prescription. It was going on so bad that the FDA had to step in and was like, if you write this prescription, you better have a reason. Like the DEA stepped in. People
Yes.
were like just making
For,
it.
so you know
Like, making
whenever
prescriptions
Trump
just to
said,
get it,
I
it
have
doesn't work.
COVID and they took him to the doctor and they were like giving him
So like
like
doctors were freaking out by
fluids.
COVID, they didn't
What
know how
was
to
that?
fix it.
They were giving him
So
what?
Like
they were
fluids
writing
or whatever?
prescriptions for this.
What was that?
They were writing so many.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. They were giving-
Whenever Trump went, said that he had COVID and he went to the doctor and they were like, he's
So,
on these fluids.
Let's take a moment and just talk about President Trump for just a moment. When President Trump got, no, I'm not gonna say negative stuff. When President Trump got sick, he was given the best care that there was. President Trump was really sick, but he never purported himself as being sick. And he'll tell you because he didn't want people to get nervous or scared. But when President Trump got sick, they gave him the antibodies, they gave him remdesivir, they gave him the steroid, they gave him everything. And so he got better pretty quickly. But not everybody gets to have all those things. Right? Okay? All right. So the largest spreader, unfortunately, are you all. Because you all want to have fun. You like your friends. You want to be with your friends. And look at Tram. She's laughing at me because she knows. But, you know, I get it. Young people want to have fun. And I get it. But, you know, early on, it's not so much like this now, but early on when the young people were throwing these big lake parties and things like that, right? So you would go to these parties, you would get exposed to COVID, and then you wouldn't be affected very much by it, but you would go home and you would take COVID to your family members. Some of them were elderly and some of them got really sick. And people just couldn't get that idea, couldn't get that concept. Okay. So you just gotta be careful. All right, we're moving on. Arboviruses.
So can I ask you one
Yep,
more?
yep.
Sorry, I just forgot about COVID. So, can you say a little bit about long COVID? Because my sister, she got COVID, and she has still to this day, I talked to her the other day, she actually has like issues with her heart now, and she's 22 years old.
About
They don't know what really is
About
going on.
15% of the population who had very serious infections of COVID-19 have this syndrome that's called long COVID. And it's different in everybody. My cousin has it, and her lungs are so badly damaged that she has to wear oxygen all the time. She is short of breath all the time. It can affect other things also, heart, kidneys, brain, all kinds of different things. And the scary thing to me right now is that we really don't fully understand what that really means. Because when they say long COVID, you have lots of things physiologically that are continuing to go on, but they're working at a way they're not supposed to. And so my hypothesis is that some of these people are gonna get really sick later on, and we're gonna miss the connection to them having COVID years before, and then they get sick later on. They have end-stage renal disease or myocarditis or endocarditis or whatever. And we're gonna miss the fact that it might be related to this because nobody's really doing a lot of research in what long COVID really means right now.
Do you think that could, be in more individuals that have like a pre-existing condition, like some type of autoimmune disease?
I don't know for sure, Tay. I can't speak to things I don't really know about.
Cause there's not enough research out, yeah.
There's not enough that I've read, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Okay? Amy, I just swallowed that, whatever that thing was, and it was really gooey and nasty.
I
don't know
told
what
you it was nasty.
Ooh.
That was floating in his coffee.
All right. Arboviruses, right? Well, at least you know I'm a real guy, right?
Yeah.
All right. That was nasty. Okay. An arbovirus is a play on words. Arbo, A-R means arthropod, B-O means born, and virus. So these are viruses that are transmitted by arthropods. And the most important of all arthropods in central Texas, Maria, is what? The mosquito, that's correct. So here is Anopheles, right? And so you can see it can carry things like Western equine encephalitis, Eastern equine encephalitis, Venezuelan equine encephalitis, St. Louis, West Nile, and dengue fever. Right? All these things are arboviruses that we worry about. The other one that we don't, that's not up here that we worry about is what? Now, malaria is a parasite, but a virus.
Oh.
What's the other virus that's transmitted by Zika?
Oh.
Zika. So if we think about this, you know a little bit about West Nile, it's encephalitis. Most people who get it aren't gonna really be affected in a negative way, especially your age group, you'll get over it. It's the elderly that we worry about, right? And right now, the cases of West Nile have been masked because of all the COVID. But COVID is now becoming less and less, so we're gonna start to see some of these things up here again. Dengue fever is now in South Texas, all the way up from the valley, all the way up through Houston, in Victoria. So it's there. So when you get dengue fever, it's also called bone break fever, because it's so painful. And so you get it the first time, and it can be kind of mild, but you get it a second time, and it can be devastating. It can be hemorrhagic, right? And so there's the little guy that carries it, and it has bands on its leg. Amy, what's the genus of that particular mosquito?
Is it the one with the- Oh, it's a stripe.
Aedes. Okay? So remember, you gotta know the different mosquitoes. What are they, Ms. Kyla? Aedes is one of them, then what? Anopheles, what's the other one? Starts with a C, very small.
Culex.
Culex. So, so then we have Zika. So Zika is a problem, but it's only a problem if you're in a place where Zika is known to be indigenous. So unfortunately, Brazil has had a lot of babies that have been born with microencephaly. So the way Zika works is you acquire it, and if you are a healthy individual and not pregnant, it's mostly a little bit of encephalitis, but then it just goes away. Zika's been around for a long time. But if you get it and you're pregnant, a lot of times the Zika virus can interfere with the nutrient uptake of the developing fetus during very important developmental periods of that fetus. And so therefore, the skull and the brain do not fully develop, and you're born with microencephaly. These are microencephalic children.
I was terrified of this when I was pregnant.
Yeah, and so you can see, here's a normal skull and brain. There you can see is the microencephaly or microencephalic. Right? The good thing is if you are gonna have a child and you've not been to any temperate regions, then you don't really have to worry about Zika. For instance, my friends who were gonna get married in Puerto Rico. And they said, we want to start a family very quickly thereafter. I said, they're gonna have a destination wedding, they're going down to Puerto Rico. And I said, you need to wait about 8 months before you have a child. I said, well, we knew you would know something about this because that's your thing. Right? And so to me, I think 8 months is plenty of time to let the virus clear. CDC has a recommendation, I don't know what it is, it might even be more conservative than what I gave, but they've had a child since then, and he's perfectly okay.
So when I was pregnant in 2018, and this was getting like real bad then, and they didn't tell you any of that. They just said it's transmitted by mosquitoes, you could get it, be scared. And I was freaking terrified.
That's the problem with the media. The media always gives you these short 3-second, 5-second little snippets, and then you get scared, but they don't tell you the whole story.
My husband, he loves to research things. Like if he has something he's interested in, he will research it for weeks until he is very versed in that specific field. So I was terrified, like I cried, you know how what pregnant women are. And I was so scared, I cried to him, and like a week later, he brought me this like stack of papers, and he was like, here's what you need to know. and the very first like cover page said, "You don't have to worry unless you've traveled." And I was like, okay.
So we've met little Miss Attitude, and there seems to be nothing wrong with that child. So she turned out quite well. Right? Not only was she born with 10 fingers and 10 toes, she's got a lot of attitude also. Right? Perfect. Herpes. So what people don't understand is herpes is not just about the buccal cavity or the genitalia. Herpes can infect every single tissue of the body. And so we need to understand that if it gets into the eyes, can cause blindness, central nervous system, it can damage the brain and cause cognitive and neuromuscular dysfunction. Bless you. Okay?
Is this also an arbovirus?
Huh?
This isn't also
No,
an
it's not.
arbovirus.
We're
Yeah.
past arboviruses, we're
Okay.
on. Okay? Now we end up talking about HIV and AIDS. One of my favorite things to talk about. And we have enough time. So first of all, this is the most diabolical virus ever. The most diabolical virus ever. Because it has the capacity to infect the one cell in the body that can turn on the immune system, the T4 helper. The T4 helper goes around the body and it comes in contact with things and it recognizes those things as being part of a body or not being part of a body. Yes? Sometimes it bumps into things and give me that little thing, hold it out here. It pumps into things, and this is a dendritic cell, and I'm the T4 helper, and I grab onto them. I'm like, oh. The dendritic cell is basically telling me, this is what I killed earlier. I don't know what it is. Can you see this thing? I'm like, no. But I'm going to tell everybody else that this is the body. Then I, as a T4 helper, who have the ability to initiate the immune response, send out all these messages to all the other parts of the immune system saying, this thing is here, hey, all of my natural killers, all my dendritic cells, all my lymphocytes, you guys need to be on the lookout for this thing, let us know if you see it, and all my B lymphocytes, you need to look at this thing and start to produce antibodies against it right now. We want to be ready in case it's here. And so the immune system gets turned on. But if you have no T4 helper, even though everything else in the immune system is working, it never gets turned on. And you become immunocompromised. Okay? People do not die from HIV/AIDS, they die of some other opportunistic disease, infection or cancer that ravages the body. Yes, ma'am?
What year was the big outbreak?
It started in '79, but it hit peak in 1980. So there's a difference, and so the mechanism is simply the same, except it's using reverse transcriptase. On the Examipu, if I say which of these infectious agents use reverse transcriptase, and I give you 5 different answers, it's HIV/AIDS.
Or fetal something.
But I'm not going to put those things in, right? Right. So I'm going to put HIV/AIDS because that's the one that affects humans. Okay? But if we think about this for a minute, there's a difference between being HIV positive and having AIDS. If you're HIV positive, it just means you've been exposed to the virus and you have the virus in you. And whether or not you develop HIV, whether or not you develop AIDS depends on some things immunologically, physiologically. Okay? If you are an AIDS patient, you're HIV positive, your T4 helper is below 350, right, per microliter. And there's other parameters. Some people say 250, some people say 200. I say 350 because that's more conservative. And if we're below that, then at least we know that you're trending toward being an AIDS patient. The third thing that has to be there is that within the last 6 months, you must have developed an opportunistic disease. Now, a long time ago, that used to be an ARC, an AIDS-related complex. We don't call it that anymore. We just call it an opportunistic disease. Okay? So if you have those 3 things, you're HIV positive, you're T4 below 350 per deciliter, microliter, and you've had some opportunistic disease or infection, you're now an AIDS patient. And once you become an AIDS patient, you never go back to just being HIV positive. You're always an AIDS patient. Yes, ma'am?
Do you believe that, sorry, these kinds of things can be treated with the European medicine we're talking about?
What European medicine is that?
Like the natural ways of doing it?
You mean the Eastern?
Yeah, that's what I meant, I'm sorry.
I have never heard of that.
Or would this
Has
be
anybody
more-
ever heard of any?
I was honestly just curious. I
No,
don't.
yeah. I've never heard of that. To my knowledge, there is no cure for HIV or AIDS.
I was just wondering if you can
Except.
control it.
Except, I will tell you, Timothy Ray Smith, somebody look him up. Timothy Ray Smith. He was a German nationalist. He had HIV and he also had cancer, and they gave him certain treatments, and it cured the cancer, but it also cured HIV.
Well, there's been like 2 or 3 people now that they've cured it.
But they don't remember what they did. Nobody wrote down notes about what they did.
How convenient.
Timothy Ray Brown. He did die of cancer, but they had cured him of HIV and cancer to begin with. Thank you for correcting me. It wasn't Timothy Ray Smith, Timothy Ray Brown.
Did bone marrow transplants?
They did that, plus they did some other things. But they don't remember how they did it or what they did, and therefore we had the treatment for HIV, or at least we had something that might have worked. We don't know what we did.
What doctor was it that like recently? I don't remember. I was just curious if there was like, since it affects your immune system, if there was some type of natural thing out there that could A, control it, or B, cure it.
There's not something natural, but I'm going to talk about something in just a minute that could control it. Did you have a question, Jess?
Yeah, have you heard of like this, or I heard of this guy, his name's Dr. Seavey, and he like went to court or whatever because he like was giving like, made sure that people had like a certain type of diet, and it was able to like, pretty much like,
Fight HIV?
yeah, like take it out of the body, like expel it out of the body. But yeah, and it's like a big like controversial thing.
You said
or whatever.
diet?
Yeah, based
Yeah,
on
there's been
diet.
a lot of things relating to your diet. Like there's this man who cured his wife of infertility with a diet. Like she had eggs, but her body wasn't ovulating, it wasn't releasing. And he basically did like this whole like, changed the entire diet, and her body went back to normal in a sense.
Cause don't
So-
you?
That shows you that your gut can.
It's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I've never heard of that, and I can't comment on that.
Yeah.
Well, what I will tell you is my little dog, Peppy, who's now gone, when he adopted us, he was 6, and he had a heartworms. And he was a little guy, and we didn't want to put him through the arsenic treatment to cure him. So we went online and did some research, and we fed him a diet that's known as Benji's diet. You can look it up. And we fed him Benji's diet, and he got rid of heartworms. But the damage to the heart was so bad that it was zero. Yeah, you couldn't repair it. So when he was 13, he died from end-stage renal disease that was due to pulmonary emphysema, which actually affected his kidneys because his heart was working so bad, or so much that he died because of that. But he had heartworms, and he would have died a lot quicker had we not done it that way. We didn't want to put him through arsenic therapy because arsenic therapy is just really hard on little dogs. Big dogs can really handle it, but not little dogs. Yes, ma'am? DX diagnosis. So yeah, that's something that y'all need to know. Some of these you know. What is this?
Prescription.
That's diagnosis. What's this?
Treatment.
What's this?
Trophy.
Prognosis. What does that mean?
Oh, and a lot of us,
No, not prophylaxis. There's another one.
when we do notice, we'll sometimes that.
What is this?
Shorten.
Symptoms.
Is that an X?
Uh-huh. So you ought to know those. Okay? What's what? P?
Prognosis.
Prognosis.
That's gonna confuse me.
He hasn't, did you have a question?
What's the S?
SX,
Mhm.
symptoms. Okay, all right. So these are all the opportunistic diseases that AIDS patients get, right? They get encephalitis, meningitis, retinitis, CMV, right? They get pneumocystis jirovecii pneumonia, which that organism is in most of us, but doesn't really affect us because we have a competent immune system to take care of business. Right? But if you're immunocompromised, a lot of times you can get pneumocystis jirovecii pneumonia, right? Tuberculosis of multiple organs, tumors, mostly Kaposi sarcoma, this is what it looks like. We always used to see Kaposi sarcomas in Italian men in their late 50s, early 60s. During the AIDS outbreak in the United States, we started to see 20-year-old males with it, and it was devastating. You could look online at some of the images of these young people who had these tumors all over their body. So, esophagitis with Candida albicans, you have chronic diarrhea, cryptosporidium, right, and then you can have tumors. Right? This is called wasting disease, and so at some point in the patient's journey through having AIDS, they become anorexic. That's different than having anorexia nervosa, right? That's a mental illness. Anorexic just means you don't have an appetite, and so you don't eat, and the body starts to consume the protein in your body for a nutrient to stay alive, and so you lose a lot of weight, and eventually you succumb because you just simply die of no nutrition. And if you have a DNR, they will not. They will feed you enough to keep you alive, but they're not going to try to, continue to feed you to make you gain weight. Okay. So HAART stands for highly active antiretroviral therapy. It's not called that anymore because it's just too long to remember. So they call it CART and ART. But these are the actual cocktail that you can take if you have HIV. And if you take the cocktail, you can live a really great long life, right? So if I was to compare a healthy male who, if we look at their lifespan from, the early teens all the way up to the average lifespan of a male in the United States is about 73, right? It was 74, it's come down for COVID, it's come down a year. But, most of the time, in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you're living great. 60s, your body starts to break down. Your telomeres start to shorten. Telomeresis doesn't work anymore. And so eventually you succumb to some disease, right? Or old age, and you die around 73, average.
So you got 10 more years after you stop. Damn.
Yeah.
What was the drug on Dallas Buyers Club?
On what?
Have you seen the movie Dallas Buyers Club?
There was this T-peptide.
Okay.
And the T-peptide was known to be antiretroviral.
Okay.
But they weren't given it in the United States for lots of reasons. One of the big reasons is DDI and some of the other early drugs were very toxic. They were trying to tout those as being the ones to do. So this guy would go down to Mexico where they had a supply of peptide T. I think it was peptide T. Somebody can look it up. Peptide T, and he'd bring it back and he would give it to the people who had AIDS, and it was helping them get better. So he got arrested because he was performing pharmacological duties in the United States without a license. That's how they held him to jail, right? But really, all he was trying to do, well, in his mind, he was making money, but what he was trying to do is really give people a chance to survive. It's a great movie if you want to talk about. If you want to talk
I know,
about
maybe
something.
I will put that in my paper.
Yeah. Peptide T. I think it's called peptide T. It might be called a little bit different now. Okay?
I was curious
That's
if
almost
there
never
was any
talked
of
about.
these.
That's almost, well, okay, so, but the cocktail, look at them, there's a bunch of them. He has a,
Maybe it's a silly question. So does that cocktail also prevent from the disease to turn into AIDS? Or
yes.
Okay.
So you're HIV positive, and if you have the resources, you can take the cocktail. And the cocktail is 3 drugs, and there are 3 different mechanisms. So some of them can interfere with the integrase that allows the virus to get into the cell. Some of them can invite with blocking protein synthesis. Some of them can interfere with reverse transcriptase, so the DNA and RNA can never be made. Some of them in here, there's like 5 different mechanisms. You do not need to know those mechanisms, you just need to know what the cocktail is. Okay, yes ma'am?
Follow-up question, you said if you have the resources, what does that mean?
It's very expensive to take the cocktail.
So-
It's about $1,200 to $1,500 a month. And if you don't have the resources, you're not gonna get these, they're not gonna give them to you for free.
So the,
Is this the cocktail we need to
The cocktail is 3 of these drugs. Okay?
so do we need to know all
No,
of this?
you just need to know what if I say the cocktail. The
So-
cocktail is 3 drugs.
Oh, you don't need to know the specific drug?
No,
Okay.
So you don't need to know the specific drugs.
Okay,
It's-
just that it's 3 drugs.
It's, the
Okay.
names are way too crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's what I was
there's some
worried.
really crazy names. So let's not worry, let's just think about high big concept, right? The concept is you take 3 drugs and you can live a really great life. So now if I compare my life to the life of an individual at 20 years old, acquires HIV, but gets no treatment, within 10 years, he's gonna get really, really sick and probably die. Within 10 years, it might be quicker than that. But now, if a same 20-year-old has the resources somehow to get the cocktail, he can live a really great life all the way up into his 50s and 60s. And at some point, we do know that the cocktail, for whatever reason, just stops working. And when it stops working, those individuals succumb to AIDS pretty quickly. But, I mean, that's a great life if you think about it for somebody who has a terminal illness. Because when you think about any terminal illness, it's about quality of life, right? Okay, my life on earth is tempered by the fact that I have this disease, this infection. I'm not gonna survive what normally would be median, right? Median is 73. And then, of course it can go longer than that, but median is 73. So I'm probably gonna die before then. But when I'm here, I would really like to be and live as full a life as I can. If I take the cocktail, I'm able to do that. Magic Johnson is the best example of somebody who has the resources. The Magic Man got diagnosed in his late 20s, right? He retired, but he was still so healthy that he came back a couple of years and coached or whatever. But now he's so wealthy, he's got his own nurse, he's got his own personal assistant, he's got his own chef, he's got his own medical assistant. So his medical assistant goes wherever he goes, and that all that person does is make sure that his cocktail is ready from him every day at a certain time. That's his job. Now he does other things, right? But he might go and, pick him up at the airport or whatever. But for the most part, he's there to make sure he gets his cocktail every day. And the Magic Man is very healthy, right? He's actually put on some weight, right? We can't say that about everybody. Okay, good. So I have a real funny story. When I was working for J&J, my wife was I told you, so a forensic scientist, and she came up to me one day and said, I've been invited to go to this conference for forensics in San Francisco. Do you want to go? That's one of my favorite cities to go to. I'm going, oh, hell yes, I want to go. So I went with her, and for the first 4 days of the conference, we were going to be there a week, the first 4 days of the conference, I was interested in all the topics, so we would go to the conference, and then afterwards we'd go see the city and do whatever, right? And then on the 5th day, I still had 3 days, but on the 5th day, it was about ballistics, and I had no interest in ballistics. And so we had breakfast. I walked her over to the conference center, and I gave her a kiss, and she said, aren't you coming? I go, no, I'm not interested in ballistics. She goes, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go walk the city of San Francisco and find some cool things. I knew what I really wanted to do. I wanted to go to the Castro. What is the Castro?
The
Does
gay
anybody
district.
know? The gay district. And the reason I wanted to go to the gay district is because I was so interested in how HIV and AIDS affected that population. I wanted to go and see the bathhouses. So I went.
Oh,
I went through the city. I found this really great church. I hung out there for a while. It's early in the morning. I hung out there for a while, took pictures, and there's a beautiful cathedral. And then I went on, and I finally got to the Castro, right? And I got there, and I was walking around, and I saw a bathhouse. It was all closed down. And I looked in the window, I was looking in the window, and about then, a couple came by, and they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm a microbiologist. I'm really interested in how HIV and AIDS affected this population." And, you know, I kept talking about them. We talked, and one of them was a real estate agent. So he called and he got me into the bathhouse. So I walked around the bathhouse. I got a picture of me in the bathtub, opening the door of the, you know, all kinds of stuff. I got those pictures because, you know, to me, that was just the greatest thing. And I sat there for a little bit and reflected about the men who were there and how they were affected and how many of them might have lost their lives, because the bathhouses was a symbol for the freedom of gay men back in the late 70s, early 80s. And even when they knew that most of the cases of HIV and AIDS were being transmitted by relationships that were being had in those bathhouses, the gay population would not allow those bathhouses to be shut down because that was a part of who they were. They finally, the health minister shut them down, and because we were dealing with this major outbreak in those big cities, right? So afterwards, you know, the couple asked me, "What are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I'm gonna find some place and have lunch, and then I'll probably go down to the Abbey and some places else. And we're having a party. You wanna come?" I went, "Hell yeah!" So I went to this party. I was the only straight dude, and all these gay men hanging out, and they were just very friendly to me. They were just people, and we spent 4 or 5 hours together. And by the time I looked at my watch, it was 5 o'clock, and I was supposed to meet my wife at 5. I'm like, I gotta go. And so I kept in contact with these two guys. They were a little older than I was, so, and then, you know, I lost track of them, but every once in a while they'd be in town, they'd call me up, but, you know, we became pretty close, and I always want to go back to San Francisco. I can't live there, I'm just not rich enough. But I always want to go back there and visit because it's a fabulous city. The only other place I like to go more than San Francisco is New Orleans. And so, but those are true stories. I need to find those pictures, Jim, of me in that bathtub because that tells a story. Huh? Yeah, I know, yeah, well, maybe not me in the lecture, but so to me, anytime I lecture about something, I feel like I gotta have that experience in order to lecture about it. An effective lecturer is one who has the experience. If you just are lecturing out of a book, I never use a book. I'm just talking about what I know because I've experienced it. And so if you lecture out of a book, it's too restricted to me. You gotta know your stuff, right? You need to be able to sit down and talk about it without looking at a book. Yes, ma'am?
So do you think due to the HIV and AIDS back in the 70s and 80s, do you think that may be why when monkeypox came out, they said that the only people that can get a virus are gay people? And I'm wondering why someone's sexuality would influence something like that, because I feel like
It's not really about being gay.
Okay.
It's just that the individuals who had monkeypox, when the pox are open, the virus are viable and they're coming out of those pustules. And if you're having intimate relationship with somebody else, there's more of a likelihood that that's going to be transferred to some type of opening in the body that the monkeypox can get into the body.
So they're just more at risk due to touching?
And the way that they behave
Okay.
when having sex.
Okay.
Okay?
Understood.
That doesn't mean that a man and a woman can't transmit monkeypox to each other. It just means that in the early parts of the monkeypox epidemic, it was males having sex with males because of the way that they interacted with each other.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Any other questions? So, I'm a little bit worried about PrEP and PEP. So PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. So if you take this on a daily basis, it's supposed to minimize the chances you're gonna become HIV positive. This particular medication was intended for people who are in monogamous relationships. One of them was HIV positive and the other one was not, right? That's not the way it's being used nowadays. People are taking this, and when they're taking this, they feel like they're never gonna get HIV, so they're doing really risky behavior, right? PEP is post-exposure prophylaxis. So this is, I've been with somebody and they've told me now that they're HIV positive. And so if they tell you that in a really short period of time, you can take the post-exposure prophylaxis and you might not get the virus, right? The other thing that can happen is if you get a needle stick, they can give you post-exposure prophylaxis also, okay? So I'm worried about this because a lot of the population that is most at risk, gay men again, are taking this and then believing that they're never gonna get HIV. And that's not true, right? It just minimizes the chances. It doesn't mean it's 100% proof. But people are thinking that, and it scares me, right? That this has been touted as, and not necessarily by pharma, although pharma's not coming back and saying this drug is really intended for people, one who's an HIV positive and a monogamous relationship with another. They're not coming out and saying that because, of course, they want the cells, but the populations themselves are basically saying, if you do this, then you're not going to get HIV. And it's all over the place. It's on billboards, it's on buses, it's everywhere, right? And it's just real scary to me that a lot of the population is not really thinking about the consequences of these relationships that they're going to get into. And the population right now that we need to worry most about being HIV positive are young Latino women and young Black women. They're the ones that we see the highest incident rates. Ladies, be sure that if you don't know the person very well, that if there is no glove, there should be no love. All right? Protect yourselves. And do not expect the male to be responsible and carry his own condom. You carry your condom, and if you decide you want to engage, you bring it out and you say, you gotta wear this. Okay? Because guys are not very responsible.
Not just guys, girls aren't either.
Okay. But when you think about this, guys are less likely to acquire HIV from a woman because the surface area is not that great.
The man.
But
higher
the
risk.
female has a lot more surface area by which the virus can get into. Okay? Good? All right. So the last thing we'll talk about today are prions, and I'm not going to say much about it today, but I will say that prions are a problem. They're infectious proteins. The most famous of all is, of course, mad cow disease, also known as bovine spongiform encephalopathy. There's a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy that we call Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, Kuru. There's a bunch of names for it. And those are things that can be acquired to humans, to people. And so we need to be worried about this because while there is some diagnoses that are happening, I think there's a population of people who have a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy and do not know they have it. And so we're going to be talking a lot more about prions when we talk about the nervous system infections toward the end of the semester, right, which is coming up pretty damn quick. We are now in week 10, and so it's moving very fast. Ladies and gentle dudes, we are at the end of